Hey Interview Pro Tribe, just a quick intro to this video to tell you to feel the fear and do it anyway. You will see that in this video that I am quite nervous at the very beginning of it, and it's because I'm interviewing someone that I have a lot of respect and admiration for from a professional capacity and a personal capacity as well. After now getting to know Professor Mel Pickup, who we're interviewing here, who's giving you some valuable insights on what a CEO thinks about interview skills. And don't worry, it's not all top level CEO related. It's some general questions and some really good tips that everyone can take advantage of. So sit down, get comfortable, grab a cup of tea, because this is over an hour's worth of content. Break it up if you need to, but good luck with your interviews. And as always, come join us on the Interview Pro Tribe courses, links below, or find the book, The Job Is Yours, if you want to start off with a read. And let's nail your performance at interview by bulletproofing that preparation, getting the soft skills of interview absolutely tip top so that you can control the nervous energy, you can communicate well, and you go in feeling confident and comfortable, and you can deliver a calm and passionate interview. Get across your points well and be the number one candidate. Take care, best of luck with your interviews, can't wait to work with you guys. Thank you. So I currently work at Bradford Teaching Hospitals as a first contact practitioner in physiotherapy. I started my career here in 2013 as a brand new Band 5 physio. I did leave briefly in 2022. I went to Harrogate Teaching Hospitals Harrogate District Hospitals for a Band 8 role in FCP. But 22 weeks later, I came back to Bradford because that role just wasn't for me. The Harrogate vibe wasn't for me. I much prefer the Bradford vibe, and from my point of view, I think in terms of work-life balance, you need to be somewhere where you're happy. So I decided to come back to Bradford, cap in hand, and came back for my Band 7 role. And when I did come back to Bradford, you did the welcome meeting at the introduction to the trust for everybody that was there. And one thing that I remember is it was a mix of people. So there were decorators, janitors, do you call them janitors now? Porters, but cleaning staff, administrators, and loads of different clinicians there. And it's just this like amphitheatre room, and you're just stood there offering a lovely welcome to everyone. And one thing that hit me was that everybody in that room was engaged, everybody was listening. And I found it really engaging and really motivating what you're actually saying. And I've never experienced that before when I've joined a trust. And that was one thing that did sit with me. I was really impressed that you could absolutely get hold of everyone that was there and everyone was engaged, because that's a skill in itself to engage a room of different people. So with regard to the other things that I noticed when you came on board as CEO, Mel, was that you're not a silent CEO. You're not in an office hidden away, nobody knowing what your face looks like. If you're on a corridor, you smile at us, you say hello, you're engaging. The other thing was the Mel's Weekly Roundup videos that you do as well, obviously keeping us informed of what's going on at the trust and using that to recognise your team members. And I think it builds that connection with your team, and that's really important, particularly for a massive organisation like this. Because some CEOs, you just see them at the bottom of your pay slips or the bottom of an email, whereas with you, I find you really engaging, which actually made me feel like it was easy to approach you, to ask you to do this. Just on a sidetrack that I've not written down on my notes, my colleagues, when I was telling them I was doing this, they were like, "What, you've gone and spoken to Mel, the CEO?" They're like, "Oh, you're mad." I'm like, "Why?
Yeah.
Mel's a person."
Yeah.
And I feel like you treat people like that as well, and that you're open to connecting.
Yeah.
Don't all come and knock down Mel's door, obviously, but she's a busy lady. But yeah, I feel like that was one of the things that inspired me to come and ask you, because I thought you could offer something and would be happy to. So thank you again for sitting down with me for it. I did go off track, so I'm going to look at my notes to get me back on track. With regard to the roundup videos and during COVID time as well, you and your team took the time out to send personalised cards to each clinical team. I was working on the respiratory team at the time, the respiratory physio team, and it actually felt like the whole hospital was working as one. It was a horrible situation, but from top down, it felt like we were connected and we had a purpose, and that was really nice, and it actually made me have a better experience than I could have during COVID. And the fact that you guys took the time to do that was really appreciated, so thank you very much for that.
You're very welcome.
One last thing, so that before I get into the questions, is just mentioning the Women in Leadership Zoom meeting from 2021.
Okay.
You opened that. Again, awesome welcome. And one of the main things that stuck with me from that was your story, from how you went from being registered nurse all the way up to the CEO of now the Bradford Teaching Hospitals. And it hit me quite, I guess it was just really inspiring. And I felt like everyone, because you can see people's faces on Zoom, everyone was like really engaged, looking at the screen, writing notes. And so I just thought, as an opening question for this, I'd love you to share your story as to how you climbed that career ladder from registered nurse all the way up to where you are now as CEO of Bradford Teaching Hospitals.
Okay. Well, it may not be word for word just as it was, Sam,
That's
so I
okay.
can't guarantee that. But in essence, don't worry, it's the same story. So how did it happen? I mean, the beauty of the NHS is, and we can talk about this later, anybody has the potential, anybody who has the potential and the desire can go anywhere in the organisation. And whether that is being a department head, a chief executive, a regional director, the head of the NHS, there aren't any barriers. Technically, we know that there probably are barriers, there's lots of barriers. Technically speaking, on paper, you can get to anywhere you want to be. And for me, all I ever wanted to do was be a nurse, actually. And so I didn't know what a chief exec was for a long time. You know, my horizons only ever really stretched to the next level up. And so when you're a student nurse, you want to be a qualified nurse, and you want to be a really good qualified nurse. When you're a qualified nurse, you kind of look and think, well, who's the most important person in my work world? Who's the most inspiring person that you look up to, a role model, hopefully, who is having an impact and making a difference. And usually it's either a senior staff nurse, or it's a ward sister, or it's somebody. And I just kind of plotted a path really to the next sort of staging post in my career. And then at various junctures kind of came across probably bits of crossroads where you could go one way or another. And in the end, it didn't matter which way that I went, because they were all stretching me and developing me and giving me new opportunities. So I liked being a qualified nurse. But the minute you become a qualified nurse, you're also kind of a team leader. And that leadership bit, I enjoyed. I really enjoyed, and I enjoyed shaping and forming a team that did a really good job. It was only by shift, so it was on a particular shift. But then that kind of lens pulls out of it, and then you find yourself doing that every shift. Because you become the most senior staff nurse. And then when you get into a junior ward sister level or a ward manager level, you've got your own team. You know, you're hiring and firing and you're shaping that team. And I didn't know it then, but you then appreciate that actually what you're doing is creating a culture, because culture wasn't really talked about then. So it's the opportunity to create a kind of a culture that you have the ability to influence with your team that might be very different to the ward that's just across the corridor. and they might do things very differently. And you might then find that people want to work on your ward and not on that ward. And people gravitate to, I think, good leaders. Absolutely. And they want to stay with good leaders. And so everywhere I went from then on really was just a kind of a bigger version of that in a different place, doing different things. But I, at the time, I wanted to be a great nurse, and in leading a team of people, I knew that the nursing care that the patients would receive on that day, on that shift, on my watch, and then on my ward, or in my division, or in my area would be great. And it just got sort of scaled up. And there was one point that kind of crossroadsy a bit at Sam, which was, I came across someone who worked in professional development and education. This was in the hospital I trained in. And she was a physio actually. And she'd moved into sort of education and training. And she used to, then we used to have really good chats about things. And I think, she recognised in me the potential for me to do something different. And she, up to that point, I'd always subscribed to the Nursing Standard and the Nursing Times, and that was my flick through.
Yes.
And they were my go-to sort of professional magazines. But then she introduced me to the Health Service Journal. And she used to give me all the back copies. So there'd be a corporate copy that went round Trust headquarters, and then it'd find its way to the pile of back catalogue stuff, and then she'd give it to me, I'd read it, put it back. And on this particular day, she said, there's something on the back page that you should be looking at, and it's this thing called the General Management Training Scheme for the NHS. And I mean, just having a health service journal opened up a huge world of something different to being a nurse in the NHS.
Mm.
And they actually have their own professional magazine even. Wow, who knew there was this thing that talked about hospital management and leadership and things like that. And then I saw this advertisement because Janet had pointed it out, and it was applied to be a general management trainee. And at that time, as is now, it's a graduate entry programme. But there were certain instances where people who had got professional registration, like I had as a newly qualified staff nurse, you could go and sort of get admitted into the training scheme. So I kind of thought, all right, that's really interesting. What is all that about? And talked to different managers about their jobs, and kind of thought, well, it's still near enough to nursing and patient care, because you're still managing clinical services in a hospital. That was important to me. It's always been important to me. And so I kind of went for it, but I didn't get on the training scheme. Didn't get on it. And there was a moment a good few years later, when I'd just been cleaning out my own home office, and I got the rejection letter from the training scheme, and the person who'd signed it had a quite a striking and unusual surname. And I've just seen it more recently. If I hadn't seen it at that point, this wouldn't have probably happened. But then I went to an NHS Confed conference in Birmingham, and by that time I was the director of nursing. And anyway, we went to a conference dinner, as you do in these conference scenarios, and there were lots of people on the table. And somebody who knew the person next door but one to me said, "Do you know each other? This is..." So I thought I instantly recognised the surname. And that person leant over to me and they said, "Oh, hello, we haven't met before." I said, "Oh, we have." And they said, "Oh, have we really?" I said, "Yes." I said, "You interviewed me for the graduate management training scheme." And they said, "Oh, really?" And maybe because I was sat in that environment and it was the NHS Confed, I think they probably thought I must have gotten on the graduate management training scheme, but I hadn't. And so I said, "Yes, you did, and you rejected me." And they went, "Oh, right, oh, okay then." And what do you do now? I said, I'm a director of nursing. And they said, oh, right, yes. So you're a nurse? I said, yes. Oh, I never put the nurses on, was what they said. I said, really? But you've done all right for yourself. I said, yes, I have, thank you. And that was a really interesting moment, because it had dissuaded me. If anything, it had motivated me. And I'd probably, as you can see, gotten to the same place. Did it take me a bit longer? I don't know. But I had done it a different way. And so the lesson was, don't be put off and don't be put in a box, because if you've got the desire and the will to do it, it's hard work, mine. I'm not going to pretend it isn't. And things aren't handed to you on a plate, but you can get where you want to be. And so that's where I was at the time as a director of nursing, and then the kind of progression into a more sort of general management board level role was by virtue of being greedy, really greedy, because I really loved the operational side of working in health services as much as the clinical side. So I ended up collecting other portfolios, and my portfolio immediately before I took on my first chief exec role was director of nursing, um, director of operations, which is now chief operating officer, and a deputy chief exec. So I had a massive job, a massive portfolio, and I worked probably stupid hours, but I was single then. It's what I did, and it's what I lived to do. And that gave me such a great grounding to then say to my then chief exec, I think I want to be a chief exec. And that's how it happened. And then I was chief exec in my first trust was a smaller specialist trust, a neurosurgical trust, neurology trust in Liverpool called the Walton Centre. Fantastic place. Took that to be a foundation trust, and then moved into District General Hospital in Warrington and Halton, and then in 2019 Bradford.
Brilliant. So, and am I right in saying that you were 38 when you got your first CEO role?
I was, yeah,
that's what you said.
Yeah.
That was one of the things that struck me, because I think anyone looking at that from an outsider perspective would think, wow, that's pretty young to be. So
yeah, I think it was. I mean, at the time it was a bit of for me it was a bit of a pattern. So I was probably the youngest sister in Barnsley teaching Barnsley Hospital, where I became a sister, and then probably one of the youngest director of nursing. So that had given me a bit of a head start, really, to cram quite a lot in. I guess, and get to that position. There are people who've done it at younger ages, but yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great, for people watching, I think that's a great kind of wake up that actually you're not too young to do something if you're focused and follow a path and maybe take opportunities that you weren't expecting.
Yeah.
That you could definitely get to somewhere you're not even anticipating yet if you do have
Absolutely. You've got to go out your comfort zone. I mean, I've got counterparts that I trained with, and because now I've got to that over 55 age, only just over 55 age, a lot of them will have retired now because they stayed in nursing. And of course, you can retire at 55 if you have retained nursing status. So a lot of my counterparts have now retired, but they're retired from the same hospital that we all trained in. And so I think some of the sort of the testing moments, like when you went to Harrogate, for example, is leaving your comfort zone to go to another place. And it gets harder the longer you stay somewhere to do that. But I think it gives you such a fantastic breadth of experience, and gives you, in some instances, there are places that I went to that I didn't like very much. And I would now, looking back, think I made the wrong decision in going, but it was useful because then you get to know the difference between an organisation you like and one that you don't like, and why you like one and why you don't like the other. And that means that you learn that the decision making process needs to encompass more than, just turning up at an interview.
Absolutely, yeah. I've done the same, and I've been and worked at Nuffield teaching Nuffield Hospital in the gyms on a Saturday, just extra to the NHS work. So still working here, but working up in Guiseley at the gym there, and it was great, and it was good fun, and it was nice to get that kind of experience of working in the gym environment. But I decided that I didn't like some of the systems and things like that. So that was I guess a decision for me that actually, I'm happy with how things are where I am in the NHS, and that actually working 6 days a week. So I just use it as a nice experience, and then I utilise kind of what I'd done there, because I didn't learn anything because it was just me there on a Saturday. So I was doing the work, but from my experience, I took things away that I've now developed in my home gym that I use with my clients that come and see me at home, and I much prefer that because I've got control of that time, so I can book people in when I want to. But without that experience of that side of things, I may or may not have set my gym up as it was, and maybe just kept a massage plinth, for example. But I think.
But there's no bad experience, is there? There's just experience, really.
It's life, isn't it? Yeah. And I think one of the main things is that when we say, from a success path, failures, it's not a failure, it's just a learning experience. And it's a decision to go, well, do I like that? No, not really. So I'm going to go back this way. Or take that different fork on the path. And I think that's just a nice.
Well, it is, because that thing about leaving the place that you trained in and referring to the counterparts who stayed there, the catalyst for me to leave was I went for a ward manager job and I didn't get it. And I knew that there wasn't going to be another ward manager job for quite a while. And that was the kind of catalyst that said, well, there are ward manager jobs, just not here, in this specialty, in this hospital. And maybe it would be good to experience another place. So I went from Barnsley to Pinfield and Wakefield. And then, I'm intending to do some of that and embrace it actually as a really great opportunity to not just learn a new hospital, but a new place, a new town or a new city.
Yeah, especially from going from the northwest over. I'm from Wigan originally, so I'm from that way. I know Liverpool and Warrington well. Yeah,
and then ended up living in Wigan for a bit. So you've got quite a hefty back catalogue of places, and still friends and acquaintances all over the place. So it's good.
It's nice to have a bit of a mix and experience the different cultures and demographic as well, because it's just different everywhere, isn't it?
Yeah.
And obviously we're lucky in Bradford that we've got a massive mixed demographic. So we've got a lot of staff that come from mixed demographics as well, and bring different aspects and positive things to Bradford. I think it's it's a really nice place to work.
What makes it really special.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
that's why I came back and I thought, no, this is home. Bradford feels like home.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. So the second question. So from our previous discussion, I'd say that we do agree that everyone can be a leader without a specific team leader title given to them. So in terms of tips that you would give to people to how to demonstrate and develop leadership skills, and maybe overcome the stigma of not kind of wanting to stick your neck above the sand and suggest something if you've not got that title, and kind of stepping above your station. Is there any tips that you would offer?
So I think you have to be. I think you have to be kind of competent, and with the competency that you have brings some confidence, and with the confidence you then put yourself forward and say those things, and put yourself forward to be that person. So if you can think of those sort of those team building exercises that you do sometimes as kids, or if you think about your experiences of being at school and PE lessons, and somebody wants to be the captain, and somebody, you know, they're in certain positions, you always get a lot of people putting themselves forward who are, you know, probably quite competent at whatever it is that they're doing, but also confident enough to lead others.
Yeah.
So you've got to work on your confidence, I think. But it's an equation, because there's two halves to that equation. So you've got to have somebody who gives you the opportunity and the permission and the support to step into that role as well. So if you're in a scenario where you think you can do more, if you have got someone who is prepared to give you a leg up, that's great. And that's what you need to be looking for, I think, when you're looking for the places that you want to work in, and the jobs that you want to, and the culture of the organisations that you want to work in. So if there is that espoused kind of commitment to try and develop everybody, and to recognise that there is a leader in everybody, doesn't matter what your title is, what your grade is, you've all got the ability to be the person who puts the note upon the staff room door that says, we're going on a night out, who wants to come? Or I'm organising the Christmas buffet, or we're having a collection for so and so, or all of those things. There are all little leadership opportunities.
Absolutely.
So yeah, and they're available to everybody. But finding somebody to work with who will encourage you, and as opposed to kind of keeping you down in a position, is really key. And that's usually, where I find myself, and I have, in situations where that has been the case. I've kind of moved on and I've moved out.
Yeah.
They're the kind of moments where you kind of think, okay, put up and shut up or ship out.
Yeah, and it's what you're willing to tolerate, isn't it?
Yeah.
I guess with that.
Yeah.
I think as well, from my perspective with leadership, and what I regularly say to our junior staff or new starters or students,
Yeah.
is that you're always demonstrating leadership when you're working with a patient.
Yeah.
Because you're guiding that patient through something to help them get better. You're helping them with something that you know a little bit more about than they
That's
do.
your competency.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then you then progress that on. So if you're a student and you know something more, so for example, one of my students, when she was on placement with us, she did something and she put a QR code in it.
Yeah.
And I was like, what is this and how did you do it? Oh, you just do it like this.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow. So actually that student led me in an area that I wasn't skilled in, and I really appreciated it. So I think never be afraid to own what you know and help other people experience it. But absolutely, in terms of climbing the ladder and developing those skills, taking it from other people that are leading by example, and I guess finding your kind of natural way of doing it as well, because not everybody's the same in terms of their personalities and how they do things.
Well, that comes back to kind of how you shape and form teams, really, because every member of your team might be very different, but because they bring different experiences, different upbringings, different background, different culture, all of those things, different levels of competency and different skills. So the famous sort of management thing is always hire people brainier, more talented, cleverer than you. And don't be threatened by it.
Yeah.
So if you've got a team of people around you, I would say our exec team here, with some brilliant people who are all much cleverer than I am in their respective spheres. And my job isn't to tell them how to do it. They know much better than I. My job is to be the conductor of the orchestra, really, so that the kind of collaborative effort gives you the right tune at the end of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really nice way to sum it up, is the orchestra and basically thriving off other people's skills and working together, because
Absolutely.
everyone's a piece of the puzzle,
Yeah,
aren't they?
you know, the person wearing the conducting thing cannot play every instrument. Maybe play one, maybe more than one. Not everyone. So
Yeah. Well, they've just got a ridiculously good ear for what works well, and can't even play a single one.
absolutely, yeah, maybe.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. So, question 3. So, horses for courses is a phrase that I think fits people and their workplaces, because not every single workplace would suit every person applying to go somewhere, as we've already kind of alluded to in the previous discussion. So I generally advise people to make contact with the department, go for a visit, see what the gut feeling is about that particular area. So is there anything that you'd recommend people do prior to going for an interview to work somewhere to get more of a better feel of the place?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you sort of, I would call it due diligence. There's any number of things that you can do. So now you can Google a place and you can find out everything about that place. You know, you can read their CQC reports. You can you can go on and access their board agendas and board minutes. Maybe, I mean, we publish on YouTube our board meetings currently. And so you can find out from the comfort of your own home an awful lot about an organisation, and that will give you one level of understanding. You might know people who already work there. You might know people who've received care. If we talk about a hospital, if you've got friends or family who've been a patient there, what have they got to say about the place? And then I would say yes, definitely go and visit. But then I'd also say what I have done quite often is a completely mystery shopping type thing. So you go on a weekend or you go in the evening, and I don't think I've ever come across a member of staff that I've encountered in any organisation I've done this, who hasn't been willing to have a chat with me about it. And you don't have to say very much. You just say, have you got 5 minutes to spare? My name's so and so so so. I'm thinking of applying for a job here. What's it like? And talk to people who aren't members of that team. Talk to a selection of different people. People are usually more than willing, as I've said, to say, "Yeah, it's all right," or it's this or that, and you get a completely sometimes different picture to that is otherwise portrayed. But you have to kind of, just sort of build that into your body of knowledge that you created in advance.
Yeah, and I guess if you're making the effort to go to the hospital and do that mystery shopping experience, make sure you ask more than one person. So
yeah,
in a rounded,
do not ask. No, don't
rounded,
ask. Ask. A selection of people. Just wander around and say, if you go in, if you went down and you find somebody sat in Costa, you might just say, excuse me, can you spare me a couple of minutes and have a chat with them? Because I'm thinking about a job here. Tell me what it's like. But yeah, take some soundings from a variety of different people.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
And the other thing you do when you've done that, of course, is when you get into the interview scenario, you can play some of that back. And then you've got people who are interviewing and thinking, "Crikey, this person's really done a lot of homework, not just the standard stuff." They must really want this job.
Yeah, so that's a nice demonstration of your effort behind the interview.
Yeah.
I think one of the other things I just wanted to ask you with that bit was what do you feel is special about Bradford Teaching Hospitals specifically?
So you said something when we started talking. You said vibe, didn't you?
Yeah.
And it is that kind of untouchable thing in terms of how does a place feel when you walk in, and how do you make a judgment about that? Well, it might be, let's be honest, we've got a 100-year-old plus organisation for the most part. Some of it's a little bit newer, but it's not a bright, shiny brand new build hospital, and there are plenty of those around. Um, um, but then there's the people bit. So you set the kind of environmental stuff to one side, and you kind of think, well, how do people look? How do people respond to you when you are walking through the organisation? If you're lost, how long would it take for somebody to come and say, "Are you lost?"
Yeah.
If you were a patient and you were struggling to walk, for example, how long would it take a member of the team here, a colleague of ours, to say, "Do you want to get your wheelchair?" All of those things are really important. I was in Marks and Spencer's yesterday, and I was just chatting to the lady who was doing the self-serve checkout, and she was getting a bottle of water, and I said, and I was getting probably some naughty stuff to eat. I said, "Well, you're being very good, and just getting a bottle of water." She said, "Actually, it's for a patient who's feeling a little bit unwell." And she was buying the bottle of water from Marks and Spencer's to give to a patient. And it's those kinds of things that I got a sense of when I walked into Bradford. Now, I came from a hospital that I always, up to that point, said, "This is the most friendly hospital I've ever worked in." But then I came here and it blew that out of the water. So I think, it's friendly, and we've already said, our workforce team, 6,500 people, represent the population for a replication of the population that we serve. So we have got 42 flags outside the door representing the countries from which all our team come, but they're equally the countries from which all our patients come. So it's hugely diverse, and you see that, and that's interesting and exciting in and of itself. And so that's the vibe I think that Bradford has.
Yeah, and I think that when I first saw the flags, my immediate thought was that actually just sums us up. It's circular in terms of everyone's part of it, us, the patients, and we're all connected in a nice, positive way. And that, to me, was just like a massive welcome to Bradford.
Yeah.
From wherever you.
Well, the other thing that we did, and consciously did it, was we talk about kindness, and kindness is important, and we don't talk about it enough. I think in health services, and one of the things I always ask consultants when we're interviewing consultants is, giving that away, answer them. Any consultants watching? If I were to go in and talk to the people that you were working with yesterday, and I said, "Just tell me 3 words to describe this individual," what would they? What 3 words would they be? And then I would say, "Okay, let's switch it around. If it were a patient, what 3 words?" And sometimes, sometimes doctors say, "Oh, competent," or "good communicator." And I said, that patients don't say that. Patients don't say that. Patients when they're hanging the washing up, talking to the person over the road who's hanging their washing up, they say, "How are you feeling?" No, no. "How was your doctor?" "Oh, they were lovely. Oh, they were lovely. They were kind. And they were this, that, and the other." And it's that kind of, "Oh, right, okay." Actually, that is really important. So that when you walk in, you drive in every entrance where it says, if you choose to be one thing in the world, choose to be kind. And I think that's what I wanted people to see, and that applies just as much to the colleagues that are working in the organisation as the people who are coming in to receive care, because it's a two-way street. There's got to be that respect and civility, and kindness.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one thing you just mentioned there about not just kind of going tick box things like, "Oh, I'm a good communicator," "Oh, I'm competent." That's exactly what I'm trying to get across in the book, is that actually that's not an answer.
Yeah.
You need an example of that, and
Yeah.
you need to be able to show examples of how you've done that with the patient, how you've done that with the team, and what actually does that mean, because communication is just an umbrella term for a load of different things. So I think that's definitely key. That does lead me nicely on to the next question in terms of communication, because I think that you're a great public speaker. In my opinion, from what I've seen so far, and like, on the videos and things, which I know you just told me you sometimes have an auto cue to give some reminders.
I should have told you that.
But there's no auto cue today. So, are there any confidence inspiring tips that you could offer specifically in relation to speaking to an interview panel for everybody that's listening?
Right, okay. So I think a bit of it has to be authentic, but it is a performance. Yeah. So if you get the opportunity to do some development around your presentation skills and how you make personal impact, then you should take that opportunity, because I think it is something you can learn. Now, it's harder for people who might be a little bit more introverts. And so people would look at me and say, when I'm doing that stuff, it's okay for you, you're an extrovert. Well, I'm not really an extrovert, to be honest. If I'm one of those people on holiday who doesn't like making friends so much, and my other half is definitely the extrovert. So we end up like with all these friends, but they wouldn't come to talk to me because I'm my head's in a book.
Yeah,
that's what I do. But then she says, "Well, that's really weird. How can you do all that? How can you do all that?" Because it is a little bit of a part of the role of being a good leader is being able to do it. So it kind of goes with the job description.
Yeah.
I think it's better it's nice when you can make eye contact and personal connections. So in that instance where sorry lecture theatre, I kind of stand on the steps, I've got right back to the top of the auditorium and work my way down. And I want to make that connection with each and every person. So I want to know who's in the room. And I ask them, because in asking that, I've made that connection. And actually, I did do a course once on a home learned course on tricks for memory. So how you memorise names. And if you can just memorise 2 or 3 or 4 names, because there's 100 people sometimes in that room.
Yeah.
But if you can just, in certain places in that auditorium, memorise 5 names.
Yeah.
And in the and what that person does, and in the course of talking about the organisation, the bit where I kind of talk about teamwork, which is the point you were making, Sam, right at the top of the conversation around everybody's as important as anybody. It doesn't matter, nobody's just a porter or just a cleaner or everybody's part of a well-oiled machine that has to work well for our patients to get the best outcomes. It's nice if you can remember that, Colin, and you're joining us because you're a reporter, because, it creates that connection. So you have to kind of feel the pain and go through it if you're not a natural presenter.
Yeah.
And so you'll have some nerves in doing that. But the more you do it and the more comfortable you are with the material, the easier it is. The worst thing in the world, and I've had to do this on numerous occasions, people say, "Oh, so they're off sick and they can't do this, whatever. That's their PowerPoint, can you do it?" And if I don't feel it, I can't do it. So if you just see me do that, you think, "God, she's terrible."
Yeah.
But yeah.
So preparation is key as well.
Yeah, and being comfortable with your material. Not that it feels like, you've it's forced and you've just sort of learned it rote. But whatever tools and techniques that you have for memorising stuff, little cards or whatever, so that if you can possibly do it without notes in your hands and things, that's good.
Yeah,
good.
Absolutely. That's another section of what I'm doing is actually I'm running courses for learning the skills, because it is a learned skill, and practice and repetition is actually a massive part of it. So even doing it in the mirror, asking your family member to ask you the interview question
Yeah.
and then you repeating that. That's the kind of things that I'm recommending people do. And we're doing like some,
Yeah.
I guess, role play scenarios with them. So I did an online course. I did the beta test pilot last month with
Yeah.
2 physio students and a nursing student. There was supposed to be 5 people on it, but there was 3. And the 2 physio students went for the same job.
Yeah.
One of them got it, one of them didn't.
Yeah.
And then the nursing student had her interview last week and she got the role as well.
Right.
Here. So, and I think just that practice and kind of empowering them that actually it's a conversation.
Yeah.
And you're just putting your best self forward.
Yeah.
You're not scary as a person that's sat on an interview panel. So I give them the techniques in terms of the nervous energy control. There's one where you can just kind of wiggle it in your ear, and that's what I've learned through acupuncture and acupressure from a physio point of view. So getting tips across like that is what I'm hoping to do for people, and all those will be in the book as well.
Well, somebody, and I have done this myself, but you feel a bit of a chump doing it. You have to do it at the toilet. It's just like, the traditional sort of power stance where you put your hands on your hips and your legs apart and you kind of just do a power stance and breathe in and out very deeply for about a minute. And then you kind of, I don't know what it does to you, but it's,
Yeah, Tony Robbins explains it really well about the neurological programming that it offers. But that's a key one, isn't it? Because it just puts you in that state of feeling confident, and that brings it back to what you were saying about developing that confidence is really important.
Yeah.
And I think that was part of the motivation for me doing this, is that I've come across so many colleagues along the way and students that I've worked with that were great, absolutely brilliant as budding clinicians.
Yeah.
But then have gone to interview and absolutely crippled an interview because of the fear of an interview.
Yeah.
So they weren't able to put the best foot forward because they got in their own way.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm hoping to be able to do, is I guess level the playing field between the people that are naturally confident and the people that aren't, which is why I was inspired to kind of crack on and get this book written. And
no, it's a great thing to do, because there are so many people. I've come across people who have been given a fantastic interview, and on the face of the interview you'd say, yeah, definitely, but then you kind of you think, actually, if you scratch the surface, is the substance there? So it is that combination of, goes back to where we started, competence and confidence. You've got to have the two, really, to get the winning combination.
Yeah, I think I was thinking about this and how, when we obviously have probation periods, and it's like a 6-month probation period, so they come in and work, and then it's are we right for you, are you right for us? And they either get the full-time role.
Yeah.
Are you okay? Get the full-time role, or they don't. But it'd be so good to be able to interview someone over the course of a week, and it'd be a practical interview, and they're literally with you for a week and working with you. That'd be so good. But I just know it's not probably feasible from a budget point of view, a legal point of view. I don't even know what things would get in, but that'd be a nice way.
Yeah.
And for people to demonstrate. But unfortunately, that's not going to happen anytime soon, I don't think, in healthcare. So, yeah.
No, but you can kind of do a bit of it, try and do proxies for that in terms of things like psychometric testing and stakeholder involvement. And so an interview is, in most senior positions, is just a bit of it. It's a very important bit of it, but there are other bits that might be spread over a couple of days. Because I think that kind of, it doesn't do what you're saying, but it's the nearest thing you can probably get to it.
Yeah, and I guess that's obviously your experience, because my experience is interviewing from a band 8 and below.
Yeah.
So I've never had that top end.
Yeah.
So I have no idea what goes on there.
Yeah.
So thank you for that insight.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there is often a question at interviews that effectively asks about what the candidate knows about the trust, which can be quite daunting to research. You have already alluded to some of it with regard to going onto Google, looking at the YouTube videos, but where would you suggest, unless that's it, where else would you suggest that people do their research, and what do you think would be the for a clinician between that kind of healthcare assistant up to, say, let's say band 6 level, because usually from 6, 7 you go elsewhere, but what would you say are the top 3 aspects to try and cover, or would it depend on where you're going for your interview of what you're doing?
Well, it depends. I suppose it depends in terms of whether it's an internal interview and you know quite a bit already. If it's an organisation that you don't know, I think that sort of due diligence around the kind of how much can I find out about this organisation, and the things that I probably would say is find out about the population that you're going to be looking after. If you're in any kind of clinical role, it will be really good and really impressive actually to demonstrate that you've done some homework, not about what happens if it's Bradford, for example, not about what happens in Bradford, but what happens in the city of Bradford and what the demographics are.
Yeah.
And things that we have one of the youngest cities in Europe. We know that our the makeup of our population is, in general terms, probably 33%, I think, BAME population in Bradford. But that's in the whole of the population, which is all age groups. If you looked at school age, it's actually nearer 50%. So if you're working with children, you know that 50% of your clientele at least will be from a Black, Asian, minority ethnic background. So knowing a bit about the prevailing conditions of the town, city that you're going to be working in is helpful because it might speak to industrial disease. If you're in a coal mining area, if you're in a excuse me, a mill area or whatever it is, it will have some impact on the kind of work that you're going to do with the kind of patients you're going to see. And then the other bit is about the values, really. The values of the organisation are they talked about? Do they have any? What are they? Are they talked about? Where can you see the values reflected in the work that when you've done your mystery shopping has been kind of demonstrated to you?
Yeah, absolutely. Great. Thank you very much. So this one's a 3-part question.
Okay.
So I'll go one section at a time and just give you a chance to answer it. So it's about you as the chief exec of Bradford Teaching Hospitals. What are you most proud of in terms of personal achievements?
So I think I would probably major on the cultural stuff because when I came to Bradford, people who knew Bradford Teaching Hospital said great things about it. It's a great hospital. Does great things. Does lots of research. It's a teaching hospital. Does all of that stuff. But it was probably a little bit too insular and inward looking. And in an era where collaboration and partnership working and system working was becoming much more important, and being a good collaborator and a good partner, we were probably a little bit too inward looking. So that was one aspect that I really wanted to try and address. And when I did my own due diligence about the organisation, and I sort of realised the extent to which we were serving such a diverse community and we were reliant on such a diverse workforce, I didn't feel like that was a very big priority for the organisation. So I don't think we did enough in recognising and dealing with equality, diversity and inclusion. And I'll give you an example of why that I say that. We didn't have an EDI lead. So that was a priority, having an EDI lead, employing an EDI lead and a small team there. Our staff networks at the time I came into the trust were pretty much non-existent. So we had an enabled network that hardly had any members, from staff with visible, non-visible disabilities. We had an LGBTQ plus network that had hardly any members and didn't meet. We had the most active network we had was our race equality network, and that had about 12 people. So now we have flourishing staff networks. Our resin network, which was the Race Equality Network, changed its name, has got probably 140 odd members now, and it celebrates the kind of and applauds and elevates diversity as a unique kind of selling point in Bradford. So the fact that we have now an annual recognition day for our Filipino staff, which we've done over the last 2 years. We celebrate the various cultural calendar milestones, whatever the religion, will have some sort of presence there. Because within our workforce, 20% of our colleagues are Muslim, Ramadan is a big thing for us. So the whole Ramadan Allies project that we've escalated over 3 years now, such that it's award winning and Health Service Journal, everybody's interested in it, is a really big thing. The kindness posters, the OD team, the investment in OD here. When I first came, there was one part-time person in OD. We've got a team of 10 people now, which is why we can do all the Thrive stuff, the Thrive conferences, the wellbeing offers, the development offers. So all of those things, it's not building something or buying a bit of kit to do a clinic. It's about the people and the culture, because I think the investment in that will bring the rewards to our patients.
Yeah, and I think that's also kind of what I meant about the Bradford vibe, is that it's very much team orientated from top down, and that's palpable. You can feel it and you can see it going on with everything around. So I do think you've done a really good job with that. So thanks for all your efforts and all your team's efforts with that as well.
Not at all. It's a nice bit of the work to try and want to do, and it will continue because it is never done. It's the work that is never ever done.
Yeah.
So we will continue and we'll grow it.
Ever evolving.
Yeah.
Brilliant. So the second part of the question for that, so again, as the chief exec, either from your team or the trust in general, is there anything that you're particularly proud of there that the team are doing or the trust?
Well, you've touched on it, I think, already, Sam, because it wasn't that long after I arrived that we found ourselves in the beginnings of the pandemic. The scenario that never any of us would have necessarily envisaged, and it was real and it was happening, and we were kind of seeing how it had evolved throughout the globe, and steadily gotten closer to us, and we'd seen the overwhelming impact it had had on hospitals throughout Europe, and the images on television, and it was a scary time. The benefit of it starting somewhere and moving towards us gave us a little bit of time to prepare. Not very much, but a little bit of time to prepare and to think about how we might deal with it. But the rest of it was done on the hoof, and it was an evolving way of working. And we made a conscious decision right at the beginning of it to establish very important touch points throughout the day. And one of those was our sort of clinical reference group. And we said, as a team of managers and leaders, we would be led by the clinicians. And the clinicians would, they would be monitoring the sort of incoming guidance and evidence, and thinking of novel and innovative ways in which we could treat patients and protect other patients at the same time. And the flexibility that was demonstrated by colleagues, people who usually had a role in an office, putting on PPE and going and working in a clinical environment at their own risk, and it was amazing. So that will, not just for Bradford, I'm pretty sure that for my whole career, that will be the standout, most demonstrable piece of teamwork that was most memorable.
Yeah, I did say, I think it's just brought the hospital together and the work as one. And because even just a real simple example, when physios and nurses are on ICU usually, or on a ward usually, if that patient needs cleaning up, the nurses will do that because we generally trot off to go and see somebody else and whiz around the wards to see as many people as we can in the day.
Yeah.
And the nurses do that. Whereas in this environment, because you obviously have to take, for if you're with different people, you'd have to change PPE and everything. Then it just made no sense for us not to do it.
Yeah.
And we all kind of merged, and that kind of element of multidisciplinary team was just so palpable. I keep using that word, but it's a feeling. And even like the consultants, and I know, so I was on ICU and we'd have the proning team come in, so people to come in and turn patients over at set times that needed to be on their front. And we'd all get involved in that as well. And you just end up on kind of first name terms with consultants, whereas previously it may be Mr. or Miss instead of John, Paul, Susan. And it just changed everything. And even after COVID, when you go back on the wards, because I continued to work overtime with the team just to help out and keep my skills up just in case. Going back on, people would still recognise you then, even without all your PPE, because they've seen your eyes for so long and they've heard your voice for so long, and you had to like get really good at recognising people's outlines in PPE. So it's just kind of kept that feeling of team. And I think that's because as soon as I came back from Harrogate, that weekend, that I started on the 15th of December back at Bradford, and on the 18th I was on the wards helping out again. After my last shift, I nearly fainted on ICU when I was saying bye to them, and they were like, "Oh well, we won't forget you now, will we?" I was like, "No." And then I was back again and they were like, "I thought you were leaving." And I was like, "Well, I did temporarily." So it was nice to come back and just feel back in the fold. And I think that's definitely there's a massive team feeling of Bradford, I think. The third and final bit with regard to that was, is there anything that you're particularly excited about for the future, either for you as a CEO or for the trust, the hospital, whichever one you'd like to?
So I think we've got some really important builds coming up, and I would have loved to have been able to have gotten on the new hospitals programme, because when I came to Bradford, I kind of asked the question. The new hospitals programme was already in train, but my question was, has nobody ever said that Bradford needs a new hospital? And the answer was, actually, no, they haven't. And I said, well, do we all agree that it does? Oh, it does. It definitely does. So should we not be saying that? Yes. So we very quickly put an expression of interest in to get on the new hospitals programme, but that had been going for several years. So we were very kind of much a wild card on that basis, and we didn't get the approval and get on the list. I think there were about 150 applicants for about 8 places in the final phase of it. And in fairness, we made a conscious decision in Bradford almost to step back from lobbying for our cause to support Airedale's cause, because their hospital infrastructure is failing because of a failing concrete issue, and that meant that the imperative and the urgency was more orientated towards resolving that. And indeed, they got on the new hospital programme, which is fantastic for them and for Bradford. Um, but we're now left with still the very old building that we've got. And so when the opportunity comes to build something like the new endoscopy unit, I'm pointing out there, there's a nice artist graphic of it, then we seize those with both hands and we kind of say, right, okay, we are stuck with what we have got here in Bradford. Our job, my job, is to make the best possible use of the space we have, of the infrastructure that we have, to create an environment that feels like it's a brand new hospital. And it will. Where we've refurbished the wards, when we've had the money to do that throughout COVID, created new environments, people will come on and they walk down a spine that runs the length and breadth of the hospital, that is, 70, 80 years old. But you walk into the ward and it feels like it's just been built. But that's not universal everywhere. So we want to do more of that to give the patients the best possible experience, really, and to make an environment that is much more conducive to the delivery of 21st century healthcare than the building that was built 100 years ago when, Nightingale wards were a thing and infection control wasn't what it was or is now, and privacy and dignity was less of a priority. We've moved on so far, but unfortunately not all our buildings have. So I'd love to be able to kind of equip us environmentally for the future.
Is that going to include a multi-storey car park? Asking for staff.
Honestly, it could possibly not talk about car parking long video. I don't know. I mean, we wouldn't rule out a multi-storey car park. At the moment, we don't have the money to do that. But we're always on the lookout for little bits of parking spaces wherever we can get them.
Well, hopefully with Bradford Council putting all the investment into the cycling lanes and things, hopefully we'll have more people cycling.
Well, yeah, I mean, Professor John Wright, I often almost nearly knock him off his bike every morning. And it always annoys me terribly when I see him at the traffic lights and then he zooms past me because he's pretty quick on it. But yeah, absolutely, we should be advocating for a lot more of that. And we've got some fantastic facilities now. As part of the how do you make it good to work in Bradford? Well, we've got some fantastic storage facilities for cycles. We've got changing facilities, which have got warming cabinets. So if you get completely drenched on your way in, you can put your stuff in and it'll be dry by the time you come back.
I didn't know about those.
Oh, well, there you go.
Because I cycle, but yeah, I try not to when it's absolutely pouring down for that exact reason, because you've got to put the same clothes on to go back.
We've got warming cabinets in the changing facilities.
Magical. I'll look out for those.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. So, next one is kind of leaning back towards hot topics for candidates at interview. And so things such as, the general things like white papers, things that are in the media. Is there anything that you think at the minute that's quite pivotal to make sure you're abreast of? Or would you just say, just scan things and just check what's going on before the interview?
Well, if you read the organisation that you're applying for a job in, they'll have a strategy. And if you read the strategy and maybe if you can read nothing else, the last set of board papers, you'll get a sense of the things that are important, because you might see the risk registers, you might see the board assurance framework, you might see an update on strategy or any of that kind of stuff, and it'll give you a little bit of insights and tidbits of information that you can kind of potentially play back in an interview scenario. If you've done a visit and you visited the department, then that's your opportunity to try and find out about what the hot topics are and the big stresses and challenges are for the department, so you can play that in. From a national point of view, the big thing at the moment is we're in an election year, and so politically we're going to have some some kind of interesting times, and we know that the NHS always is one of the top priorities for any manifesto of any political party, to be really clear about what they want to do, what they will do if they become the government. So that's an interesting one to think about and look at. The sort of change that happened, maybe it was the 5 year forward view, but it's probably written about 10 years ago now, was much more of an emphasis on collaboration and integration, system and place-based working. So we have in West Yorkshire, for example, a very strong integrated care board, very successful and award-winning, in fact, Health Service Journal last 2 years Integrated Care Board of the Year, and Bradford is one of the 5 places in West Yorkshire. And so it has its own identity and its own plan. And if you can find out about what is happening in the sort of ICB, remember that acronym ICB, then you get some insights into understanding how the interface of the hospital with all its partners and its population and its communities is happening, because there are real opportunities, I think. Not all hospitals are the same, not chief execs think the same, but the way I think is, we're a very big organisation, an anchor institution. We employ an awful lot of people, to 6,500 people, a lot of them live and work, not just here, but live in Bradford. They have families. So there are lots of kind of connections, and we have a sort of a moral responsibility, I think, as somebody who employs that many people and spends, sort of £1 billion a year probably. How we, well, 1.2 billion actually in the whole of Bradford on health and care, and how we spend that. Where does it go? Into whose pockets does it go? Into what services does it buy? All of those provide jobs and things like that. So just think a little bit broader than, what you do with a particular patient on a particular day.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. The next question is a two-pronged question. So, why would you recommend working in the NHS? And what do you feel makes it an attractive place to work for clinical staff from that assistant level and upwards?
So I think that the NHS has some really good terms and conditions. So I think it offers structure and security. It has, like we said at the top of the conversation, you can enter here and you can end up practically anywhere, really. And I reference this in the corporate induction that I do. There's 250 different jobs that you can do and be part of the NHS. You can do those jobs somewhere else, but you could also do them in the NHS. If you want to work in engineering, you can work in an engineering firm, or you can work in engineering, estates and facilities, electronics. You can work in photography, anywhere. But you can also work in medical photography, or in our comms and marketing team, or in the people who record the videos for the weekly vlog. So there are any number of avenues that you can explore, and the NHS is a good employer, and it gives you lots of opportunities if you choose to take them, and it gives you kind of a structure in which to work and progress, and you can stay in it for as long as you want. And you can also transfer those skills between different healthcare organisations, and know that the skills you've learnt in one are going to be eminently portable and transferable to another.
Yeah, I think that's a good point as well, with it being portable and transferable. With you being in the NHS, it's not just one hospital.
Exactly.
You're in a network, aren't you?
Yeah.
So you can literally bounce around and kind of be secure in that you're going to get paid either the same
Yeah.
or more,
Yeah.
dependent on what you're doing and how you negotiate when you move on to the next hospital. Yeah. Well, thank you. So these have been some absolutely fantastic insights so far. So I'll wrap up with the last question, if that's all right, Mel. And it's basically, have you any final thoughts or words of wisdom for people going for their first interview or as they're writing applications?
Yeah. So I guess all I'd say, in addition to all that we've talked about, is an interview. Don't think of an interview process as you having to really fight really hard to get a job. It's as much a two-way street as going on a date, meeting a person, choosing the life partner. You're not marrying the organisation, but for as long as you're in the organisation, you probably see as much of your work colleagues as you do your partner. So you have to make the right decision. It has to be right for you. And the amount of effort and energy that you put into giving your best, putting your best foot forward, will also double up in giving you the best possible insight to know that you're making the right decision. You might make the right decision about the organisation, but the wrong decision about the team. It might be, the right decision about the organisation, but the wrong job in the organisation. So you've got to weigh up all of those things, but don't ever think that, the interview is all about me having to do all this. It's right until the end, right until the bit where they say, and if we offer you the job, will you take it? There's a reason for that. Because all the way through that process, whether that has been, just a one-off interview that lasted 40 minutes, 45 minutes or longer, or it was a series of stakeholder groups or psychometrics or competency tests or whatever, right up to that point, you could change your mind. You might hear or see something in the course of the interview that you think, I'm not quite sure about this now. And don't be afraid to sort of say yes just because you're that flattered to have been offered the job. It's got to be the right job. You've got to feel good, because if you don't, you'll find yourself, and I have found myself in this situation a couple of times, thinking, I think I made a mistake here, but I'm not a quitter. And what's the most respectable time I have to do here before I can leave, because I know it's the mistake. So two-way street.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for your time today. That's been absolutely brilliant. And I can't wait to read through, watch back the videos and annotate everything so that I can, one, absorb everything that you've said again, and two, get it down and get it out there to people so that they can benefit from what you've had time to offer us today. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. I might be back again for something else, if that's okay.
That's fine.
Because this has been great. Thanks a lot, Mel.
You're
Appreciated.
welcome.